Good evening, everyone. I'm Andrea Green, Director of the Visiting Artists Program at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this evening's lecture by Elisa Attila. SAC's Visiting Artists Program hosts a variety of presentations each academic year by internationally recognized artists, designers, and scholars to foster a greater understanding and appreciation of contemporary art and culture. As we celebrate the school's 150th anniversary, it is an honor to have Elisa Attila visit SAC, and I would like to thank her for making the time to be here to share her work with all of us this evening. At the end of the lecture, we'll have a few moments to take some questions from the audience. Our staff will have microphones circulating for your use. And I'd also like to kindly ask if you could silence your cell phones and please refrain from taking any photographs or video of tonight's lecture. So thank you for joining us, and now I'd like to welcome to the podium Bruce Jenkins, professor in the Department of Film, Video, New Media, and Animation, to introduce Elisa Attila. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrea. I'm here, like you, in order to learn more about a distinctive art practice that has been widely presented, discussed, and yet somehow still refuses to give up its secrets. So I claim no mastery over her oeuvre, but bring with me rather a chronic state of curiosity vis-a-vis her work. Of course, introductions have to present some attempt at knowledge or critical insight. So let me proceed. I'd like to start with a comment by my former SAIC colleague, the art historian Michael Newman, who in his comprehensive attempt to capture the welter of moving image art that emerged since the 1990s, speaks about Attila's work in terms of public intimacy and strangeness, referencing what he termed the intimacy of television as her starting point. I can imagine an updated version of Michael's essay where he might view Attila's work as a prescient example of the myriad ways that social media and the ubiquitous screens we all carry allow any one of us multiple platforms on which to bear one's innermost self. Now, my own first encounter with her work was with the single-channel films, and it evoked a different arena of moving image practice from Michael's. Rather than television, I was instantly reminded of cinema, in particular the art film, and even more specifically, the work of Ingmar Bergman. Like Bergman, Attila uses a medium renowned for its ability to capture the surface of things, to focus laser-like on inner struggles. The Present, from 2001, is a suite of 5 film portraits of characters, each experiencing some form of psychological turmoil. The key moment for me came in one of the short pieces called Ground Control, in which a teenage girl lays down in a mud puddle outside of her home. Shifting frames of reference, it might be useful to recall that Elisa Attila started out as a visual artist. Now, I've spent many years looking at just such artists, Bruce Conner, Michael Snow, Andy Warhol, whose output I've begun to label as painting by other means. As Conner noted, all of his projects started with drawing, and one senses in Attila's work the primacy of the hand. While her artistic training included no less than 2 film programs, one at UCLA, one at the American Film Institute, there is a distinct difference between her mise en scène and that of conventional narrative films. While she works with a professional crew, has even employed trained actors, the elements that come together in her work are never fully explained. Or more accurately, they are not exhausted by their role in conveying narrative information. Something else is always there, some excess, some detail that defies explanation. If we call her a painter, then we should acknowledge that this field has never been particularly hospitable to women, nor to issues informed by the experience of growing up female. Atala is, in this regard, part of a generation of women artists who jettisoned traditional fine arts media and picked up cameras instead in order to express ideas and concerns that were not able to be rendered by other means. In this regard, she's been a true pioneer, a member of a select group that would include Isaac Julian, Steve McQueen, and Tacita Dean, filmmakers who crossed over from the black box into the white cube. She's become a role model for an entire generation of younger artists who find in her haunting tales a pathway uncompromised by the rules governing feature filmmaking or the aesthetic norms of fine art production. It is a cinema that can crawl, that can rave, that can fly, that can console, that can bear witness, that can empower and reflect. It can inhabit the screen space of cinema or migrate across multiple screens to spatialize her themes and issues. As I've said at the start, I'm really still a stranger here myself, grateful to be in the presence of a major artist whose work resides in the collection of our museum here, as well as in those of the Tate in London, San Francisco MoMA, among many others. She's had monographic exhibitions at the Jeux de Paume in Paris, Kunsthalle in Zurich, MoMA in New York, and the MCA right here in Chicago. She's participated in many of the most important international exhibitions, including the Venice Biennale, Documenta, Manifesta, the Istanbul Biennale, and the Sydney Biennale. Finally, she's earned several prestigious awards in her career, including the Edstrand Art Prize in Sweden, the Coutts Contemporary Art Foundation Award in Switzerland, and the inaugural Vincent van Gogh Award for Contemporary Art from the Netherlands. Aija-Liisa Attila lives and works in Helsinki. She actually flew directly here to Chicago from Helsinki, and we're enormously pleased to have her with us at the school tonight. Please join me in welcoming Aija-Liisa Attila.
Good evening, everyone, and many thanks, Andrea, for inviting me here, and thanks for your kind words, Bruce. I'm actually going to talk about an installation and a film called The Annunciation, which I made 2010 today, but first a few words about the context and my background. So I don't know how much I'm going to talk about the same things than you did, Bruce, but probably not. I'm a visual artist and filmmaker. That means that I work with moving images in different contexts and formats. I'm going to say a few words later why moving images, but when I do a work, I do an installation to a museum, gallery, or art space, and then also I make a film version of the same theme or subject. Okay. I've also done works for public screens. One was in Tokyo, which was shown in there was a short film which was shown in several screens in 6 different places where a lot of people were passing by during the day. I also have made some works for TV. For example, Project, actually, which I'm going to show to you soon as an example of an older work, which was shown in TV between the adverts. I've studied art, or actually first I studied law. I wanted to be a lawyer, to kind of had this idea to work for people who didn't have a chance to fight for themselves, so I thought that that would be a task for me to do something real in life. But then I started to study art because I started to have headaches being only in the university and studying law. And then later I also studied film in London College of Printing, and also in Los Angeles in UCLA. I've been teaching a little bit. I was a professor of moving image in Helsinki University Art Academy. And then I've been, in some of the juries in film festivals, once in Venice and once in Fit Marseille and a few other places. I also make photos and drawings. I think I'm kind of, if this is me, something like originally a person whose medium is the pencil, to kind of, it's a bit similar process, I think, drawing as writing a script, that you have an empty white sheet of paper in front of you, and then you start seeing things there, and then you kind of make them more visible with the pencil or the computer. Yes, I live in Helsinki, but I also live in a forest, in a cottage by a lake, which is very important for me and becoming more and more important. The quietness and the nearness of nature and the other kind of beings and breathing around me. So I've been making moving image work since the early 90s, which means almost 25 years now. So far I have made 15 installations and I don't remember, maybe 9 films or something like this. And I'm going to show you, or Sara is going to show you some of them as installations, because we just made an installation drawing of all of them, because I will have an exhibition opening next week in Albright Knox Museum in Buffalo, and they are going to publish a book about the scripts and synopsis and some essays and interviews. And in front of each work we made something like this, and I think it makes it quite clear to how the piece is going to be shown, or should be shown in a space. This is If 6 Was 9 from 1995. And this one is Anne Agian Card from 1998. The next one is Consolation Service 1999. And this is The House from 2002. And this is Fishermen 2007. And this is Where is Where from 2008. Horizontal 2011. And this is from last year, a piece called Studies on the Ecology of Drama. And I'm actually going to talk a little bit similar things than in this work, even I'm not going to talk about this work today. The topics in my films and installations have shifted from family relationships, mental disintegration and colonialism, to processes of perception and attribution of meaning, and more recently to biopolitical themes and the possible representation of non-humans. Now I'd like to show you one of the earliest work from 1993 called Me, We, OK, Grey. It consists of 3 short, 2-minute long parts, episodes, and it was made to be shown in TV among the advertisements. It got started when I was one evening at home doing something, I can't remember really what, and the TV was open and I was watching it time to time. And I saw there an advert which kind of reminded me of a short film. And then some time passed and I saw the same advert again, and which made me think whether it was another edit of the same thing or I just saw it differently. And this kind of, created an urge to do something between the advertisement and try to kind of make a short film and see how it would work if it would be represented among the adverts repeatedly as the advertisements. So then I contacted a TV channel, and they were interested at that time. In Finland, there were only few channels which showed advertisements, and they couldn't kind of provide me any financing for making the work. So I turned to Wiley Channel 1, and so I made these 3 pieces with them. And they showed them between their other programs during one evening repeatedly. I mean several evenings, but repeatedly. And later they were also shown in one channel in Switzerland, and our channel in London, and Arte in Europe, in other countries, and so kind of they were shown as intended then. So let's look at the work.
Ensimmäinen asia, jonka hän teki väärin, oli ystävien valinta. Yritin auttaa häntä, mutta se oli jo etukäteen epäonnistumiseen tuomittu yritys. Mitään ei ollut tehtävissä. Väitellen hän sitten unohti koko asian. Kaikki on mennyt hienosti lukuun ottamatta joitain impulsseja. Silti minusta joskus tuntuu, etten tiedä mitä vaimoni oikein lopulta haluaa. Tyttäreni on sen sijaan aina tullut hyvin toimeen äitinsä kanssa. Hänellä ei kuitenkaan ole kovin läheisiä ihmissuhteita perheen ulkopuolella. Haluan pitää yksityisyyttä. Hän sanoo, meillä olikin enemmän tai vähemmän eettinen kriisi. Kuitenkin olen sitä mieltä, että kannattaa pitää kiinni siitä, mikä päättää. Isä! 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 Minä ymmärrän, mistä se voi johtua. Todennäköisesti kyse on vain siitä, että joku ei rakasta häntä enää. On typerää heidän puoleltaan yrittää salata minulta tunteensa. Joku katselee olkapääni ylitse. Ehkä minä. Ja sanoo, sinä palaat ajassa siihen päivään, jona olit ylioppilaskokeissa. Kyllä, mutta tällä kertaa aion epäonnistua.
Menen kaipauksesta tunnottomaksi.
Kun en enää tunne mitään, lyön.
Lyön häntä siksi, että itse tuntisin jotain.
Ja joka kerta, kun lyön häntä, hän rankaisee minua. Rangaistukseksi jokaisesta lyönnistä hän ei rakastele kanssani 2 viikkoon. Kärsin rangaistustani ja kilpajuoksu alkaa. Ja jokainen kerta haluni ehtii voittaa pelkoni. Ja kun aika on kulunut tarpeeksi, olen tullut lyönneeksi häntä 29 kertaa. Ja minulla on 54 viikkoa aikaa suorittaa. Ja minä ajattelin, että jos vain kykenisin muuttumaan, muuttuisin koiraksi ja haukkuisin ja purisin kaikkea, joka liikkuu edessäni. Hau, hau!
Hau, 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 hau. Niin monet järkyttävät lauseet ovat pyrkyttäneet ilman meidän välillämme. Lauseet siitä, kuka tekee enemmän töitä, lauseet raasta ja ulkonäöstä, syyllisyydestä, luottamuksesta. Kaikki tunnetusta lauseesta hirveimmät. Sanat eivät toimi. Käsitänhän minä, niinhän se on. Suurin osa miehistä on elukoita, ne ei välitä. Ja noin ihana kuin sinäkin olet. Helvetti, se on väärin.
Ja sinä vanha lutikka, jolla on inhottava luonne ja naama kuin hevosen kyrpä.
Se on okei. Se on okei. Se on okei. Millä keinolla voisin kertoa hänelle jotain? Teen kädellä jonkinlaisen velton kaaren ilmassa, sydämeni menee kasaan. Avaan suun ja suljen sen suoraan rakkaani käsivarteen. Puren. Sekunnin kieleni maistuu suolalta ja siinä on anteeksi pyytävää surua.
Se on okei. Se on okei. Se on okei.
Lumi sataa. Kuumat hiutaleet putoaa hitaasti. Jokainen hiutale kirjoittaa viestin solujen atomeihin ja molekyyleihin. Rutenium 103, keesium 137, jodi 131. Lumisade ei lakkaa.
Ja mitä pitäisi tehdä? Asettukaa suojaan keskelle huonetta, yhtä kauas kaikista seinistä, ja hankkikaa hengityssuojain.
Reaktorijäänteet ovat avoimena ulkoilmassa. Punaista. Mustarastaat lentävät muuttomatkalla ohi.
Niiden siipien jäänteet sulavat säteilystä, niitä putoaa sadoittain maahan.
Juoksevat hetken ympyrää ennen kuin kuolevat.
Haluaisin mennä kotiin, mutta maahan on vedetty kynällä viiva. Seis. Tästä ei yli astuta. Se on minun käsialaani. Räjähdystä seuraa paineaalto. Katto nousee ja putoaa ylöspäin.
Pelko pitää minut sängyssä. En ymmärrä vierasta kieltä. En tunne ketään. En kuule outoja ääniä. Lopussa nostan aina sormeni koholle ja kirjoitan, niin kuin neitsyys kerran menetetty.
Muuraan itseni umpeen. Borin funktio on lopettaa ketjureaktio.
Lyijy suojelee gammasäteiltä, hiekka tukkii reijät ja pidättää fissiotuotteita.
Kaikki lohdutuksen äänet ovat riittämättömiä.
100 radia on 1 grey.
Thank you. So it's quite an old work, actually, I realize. Okay, something shortly why what inspires me in the moving image. Moving images possess a central place in our world-making processes and how we see and understand things around us. Moving image mirrors and represents reality and also hides and transforms it. It places itself in the middle of reality and it communicates and reshapes it. Moving images create us the clearest picture of our world we've ever had, one that objectifies things and makes them manageable, produces knowledge and order to different worlds. And with it, distances us from those we share this planet with. And at the same time as it is looking at things, making objects, it creates us a certain position of a viewer. A moving image shows the planet to us as a picture. In the works, I try to find out in what ways and technical means this picture is created and how meanings are situated in the image. Who gets to be represented in the image of our world? What qualities are required of an actor? Whose space are we colonizing with the image? What kind of life does the mechanism see? What are the politics like that enter the image? What kind of different possibilities are there to present things with moving image and how to move others with it? So now I'm going to talk about the Annunciation, the work that I made 2010. It was completed and in December and shown for the first time in Paris Gallery in the beginning of December. Our Annunciation is an installation where 3 images are projected on white walls. Covering the floor, there is a Marian blue carpet. In the installation, the central image of Christian iconography is constructed and reenacted through moving image. It is based on a narrative in the Gospel of Luke and on paintings of the Annunciation. There's Sarah showing some images of the paintings, and the last one is our Mary and Angel Gabriel. In this Annunciation, the events are set in the present. The work consists of material produced during the preparations for shooting and an actual reconstruction of the event of the Annunciation. The footage was shot mainly during the frosty winter season of 2010 in the snowy Aulanko Nature Reserve in southern Finland and on a set depicting an artist studio and the scene of the Annunciation. All human actors, except for 2, are non-professionals. Most of them are clients of the Helsinki Diakoness Institute's Women's Support Services. The animal actors are a trained raven, 2 ordinary donkeys, and a group of carrier pigeons from a bird farm. Although based on an existing script, the events, roles, and dialogue were adapted during the filming process to each actor's individual presence. The idea, when I was starting to work with the Annunciation paintings, was to study all characters and elements that are to be found in the gospel and in the paintings, and to build the story with them. To find a group of actors who would be able to work with questions concerning the Annunciation. For the human actors, I chose women who had experience about the rough side of life. So I thought that maybe these women could be kind of experts to what could be sacred. And that's why I turned to them. The donkeys were trained to work with people, as well as the pigeons, and the raven had performed in films before. For early on, it was clear to me that the reason for making the work or the answers for my questions concerning the Annunciation could not come from me. After some hesitation, I anyway decided to write a script for the piece. Since there were so many amateurs performing to the camera, I felt it could help if there would be a text of the events and some kind of a dialogue which to rely on if needed. I also felt responsible to make the actors feel safe on the set and to give them a script as a tool. The script was to be used as a support in the background so that it would not prevent all the different actors from doing and reacting how they felt appropriate. Everything should be left open for unexpected things to happen. One of the first things that I was curious about in the Annunciation was how would we experience sacred today? Could sacred have a different meaning than something which is not to be touched, left untouched? Could it, on the contrary, have this specific quality that touches us, makes us touched, or moves us? And what kind of experience would that be? Another question concerned the idea of a miracle. Does it have a meaning and context nowadays, and could that be approached through remaking the Annunciation? And what it would mean and bring along to work together with animals. And then the unavoidable practical question: how to turn a painting into a moving image work, and how to bring the theme of the Annunciation into present day. To find the answer, the attention needed to be turned to the language and means of expressing with moving image. I needed to employ the vocabulary and grammar of the moving image in order to transfer the painting into a work that has a certain duration in time, that would be presented in space surrounding the viewer. In other words, to transfer an image into an event unfolding in time. This change in presentation brought along certain problems, of which I will give a few examples. Where should the Annunciation scene start from? What would be the first image? Which or who should be the characters in the scene? Mary, Angel Gabriel, God, donkeys, Mary's mother Anne, donors, pigeons, a lily. What information should be included? What should come first, what later? How and in what order should the information in the paintings be arranged? A specific problem was when the angel approaches Mary, what does Mary see? What should Mary's point of view should be like? We do not exactly know Mary's point of view. How would she see the situation? How should I approach Mary's character? The question raised by the transformation led to the need to make the tools of the moving image visible in this Annunciation. The other reason for placing the emphasis on how things are constructed with moving image is the requirement to bring the Annunciation into the present day. But what is present day here? How should it be defined? Which one of the many possibilities for interpretation should I choose? The present day of the work forms the context for the events in the work, which should be approached using the medium of the moving image. In other words, instead of being expressed exclusively, for example, through location, the present refers to the current status of representation, to the way in which the moving image as a medium functions to create views and worlds and stands in a particular relationship to the subject, place, and time to be presented. During the scripting process, I came across the Estonian biologist Jakob von Uexküll's text on Umwelt and parallel worlds. Von Uexküll's idea seemed to offer a befitting way to approach the concept of miracle and its possible significance to the present. I will read a short excerpt from his text, A Stroll Through the Worlds of Animals and Men. We are easily deluded into assuming that the relationship between a foreign subject and the objects in his world exists on the same spatial and temporal plane as our own relations with the objects in our human world. This fallacy is fed by a belief in the existence of a single world into which all living creatures are pigeonholed. This gives rise to the widespread conviction that there is only one space and one time for all living things. Only recently have physicists begun to doubt the existence of a universe with a space that is valid for all beings. I don't actually know when this book was originally written. I can't remember, but he died 1944, so this 1957 must be just the reference to the book and when it was published in the book. When I was making the Annunciation, I actually ran into a little book in a bookstore in New York, which is called Creaturely. Unfortunately, I cannot remember the writer of the fine book. When I found those lines in the book, that was the first time I learned to know about Jakob von Uexküll. And then I made some studies and found from Amazon the text in what's that kind of, not a new book, but a second-hand book. And I ordered that. During that autumn, then in December 2010, when I was in Paris, somebody told me that his book has just during that autumn been kind of republished there. And also then later, when I met Gary Wolf, I learned that he had that had also happened here in the US during the same time. Von Uexküll's ideas about the simultaneity of the separate worlds of different living beings offered a framework for considering the modes of existence of other living organisms. It constructed new spaces and environments and also laid down boundaries for illustrating coexistence, compassion, and the plurality of understanding. Von Uexküll's ideas also enabled me to see the miracle as part of experiencing the other, of a process of perceiving the opening up of something beside you that one had previously been unable to see or recognize. Von Uexküll gave me the tools for transposing the idea of a miracle from the divine into the human reality, or to realities that also include non-human existence. As the script process, it became increasingly, As the script processed, it became increasingly evident that instead of writing a finished piece, that could define the nature and manifestation of the miracle beforehand, it would be better to leave the issues open as long as possible, to be processed together with all the different actors. Coupled with the idea of parallel worlds, this highlighted the importance of opening up the work by expanding upon the concept of performing. Acting in moving image is contingent upon the medium itself to the way it creates worlds or environments. The most obvious thing that distinguishes acting in moving image from live performance is, of course, the lack of direct contact between the actor and the audience. The performance is transferred from one space and time to another with the mechanics of the moving image. This calls for awareness of the nature of performing and its potential. This is an important issue, particularly now when the representation of everything in our environment, including non-human animals, has increased explosively. On the other hand, the moving image provides a particularly fine way for approaching performing more broadly. It offers a tool for exploring the register of different actors and for broadening the scope of performing also beyond human actors. The English word for acting contains a direct reference to action. The Finnish word for acting is näytellä, which is a reference not to action, but to showing, näyttää. The main narrative device that takes the story forward in the cinematic tradition is action. The centerpiece of action is usually a human. The narrative format and the manner and rhythm of moving created by this anthropocentric approach sets the conditions for all other aspects of performing. If instead of action we were to take, if only hypothetically, showing, näyttää, as the premise and call actors those who show, instead, it becomes easier to expand the scope of the cast as well as their ways of performing and communicating within the image. A case in point would be a situation in which, instead of a human, the protagonist is, for example, a tree. In Annunciation, the cast includes both humans and animals. The events, roles, and dialogue were adapted during the filming process to the individual presence of each actor. The purpose of using such a varied cast was to use the performers' different types of presence and performing to open up the work and to show the way to the parallel existence of different worlds and the possibility of miracle in an encounter with the other. I think we just have time to watch the film, which will take the Annunciation, which will take 37 minutes. And then after this, we will have the questions and answers. Thanks.
Jotta jokin saa alkunsa, on pakko vain aloittaa ja ottaa yhteyttä johonkin, jota ei vielä ole, ainakaan omassa tiedossa, ja kirjoittaa siihen lisää. Kuinka tietää, mitä asiat ovat, ellei ole tuttu niiden kanssa entuudestaan? Mitä niistä siinä vaiheessa tietää? Miten sellaiset asiat ovat olemassa? Miten päästä niiden viereen ja aloittaa keskustelu? Mistä ja kenen kielellä? Vaistomaisesti lähestytään sen kautta, mikä tunnetaan ja tiedetään. Joskus niin tarkkarajaisesti ja voimakkaasti, että nähdään vain yhdestä pisteestä, yhteen suuntaan. Asiat selvässä järjestyksessä, yksi edessä, toinen vähän sen takana ja niin edelleen, perspektiivissä. Entä voiko jo tuttu asia täyttää ihmeen tuntomerkit? Voiko hämmästyä sijoiltaan jostain, jonka tuntee läpikotaisin? Mitä silloin näkee? Ehkä eteen tulee kysymys, jota ei ymmärrä. Tai kuva jostain, joka alkaa vaivata mieltä. Ne laitetaan esiin johonkin, mistä ne voi havaita. Ja jäädään odottamaan, kuka tulee katsomaan. Ja miten se niitä katsoo. Korppi istuu lumisella puun oksalla lähellä runkoa, tuulen suojassa. Matalalla olevan talviauringon valo siivilöityy puiden ja oksien välistä ja lämmittää sen mustia höyheniä. Se huutelee ympäristöönsä silloin tällöin ja katsoo lumen pintaa tarkkaavaisena. Se kääntelee päätään ja räpäyttää silmiään huomion herpaantumatta tarkkailupaikan alapuolisista tapahtumista. Se näkee vanhat metsäjäniksen jäljet ja kuulee punatulkun, joka lentää kuusten takaa ohi. Se kertaa ympäristön vihjeitä ja tuttuja tunnusmerkkejä. Sitten odottamatta sen eteen ilmestyy kuusen takaa polkua pitkin etenevä joulupukki.
Hei, mä oon Taru. Hauska tutustua. Hyvä. Mä oon Jukki. Mä oon videosta. Hei, Eula. Mä oon Taru. Hei. Mika. Eula. Jukki. Hei Jukki.
Joo.
Moi. Mariina.
Moi.
Älä pelottele minua. Minä en ole ollut miehen kanssa. Olen neitsyt ja olen menossa ihan kohta naimisiin.
Se on hyvä juttu se. Korkein voima tulee ja peittää sinut varjollaan.
No, sitten minä hyväksyn tämän. Tapahtukoon niin kuin sanot.
Kiitos. Se meni tosi hyvin. Ulkoa jo koko juttu. Okei, tosi hyvä. Te voitte mennä paikallenne. Niin
Hei ohjaaja, mitäs me muut sitten ollaan?
Mikä sä haluaisit olla? Ei ehkä 2 Mariaa, mutta me voitais kehittää joku toinen. Miten olisi Marian äiti Anna?
No en mä ehkä halua Anna olla. Voisiks mä olla pyhimys?
Joo, katsotaan. Sitä paitsi Maria ei ollut äitinsä luona, kun ilmestyisi tapahtuvan tuolla omassa kodissaan Joosefin luona, mutta Annahan voisi tulla käymään Marian luona. Tietenkin.
Mä oon nyt vähän pihalla. Kukas mä nyt sitten oon?
Siis sä oot palvelija 1 ja mä oon 2.
Okei.
Joo.
Missä Maria sitten oli?
Anna oli antanut Marian kirkolle palvelukseen 3-vuotiaana. Ja kirkko lupasi Marian vaimoksi Joosefille.
3-vuotiaana?
Joo.
No miten niin pienen lapsen voi antaa pois? Se on ihan hirveetä.
Kiitollisuudesta Jumalaa kohtaan. Anna oli nimittäin jo vanha, eikä ollut tullut raskaaksi koko ikänään. Ja hänen miehensä lähti autiomaahan rukoilemaan ja paastoamaan, että he sais jälkeläisen. Ja samaan aikaan toisaalla Annalle ilmestyi enkeli, ja hän tuli raskaaksi ja synnytti lapsen, nimittäin Marian.
Oho, siis pyhästä hengestä raskaaksi tuleminen on siis perinnöllistä.
Oli muitakin naisia, jotka oli tullut hedelmöittynyt pyhästä hengestä, kuten esimerkiksi Elisabeth, Marian serkku, 6 kuukautta ennen kuin Maria tuli raskaaksi.
No kukas sen lapsi sitten oli?
Johannes.
Johannes Kastaja vai?
Kyllä.
Ei, siis en niele tuommoista, että pyhästä hengestä tulee raskaaksi. Se on vaan selitetty, että kun on käynyt jossain joku pökkäseen.
No niinpä.
Niin, että on
Siis,
pyhästä hengestä.
siis ettekö te oikeasti usko?
Uskot sä?
Uskon.
Siis ihan oikeesti.
No, uskon.
Miksi tässä kuvassa on kyyhky ja ympyrän sisällä kädet?
Marian ilmestyksestä tehdyissä maalauksissa on yleensä mukana myös pyhä henki ja Jumala. Pyhä henki on yleensä kuvattu kyyhkysen hahmossa ja Jumalasta näkyy tavallisesti vain kasvot tai sitten kädet. Mutta nyt olisi mukavaa, jos kaikki olisi ihmishahmoja.
Tuntuu olevan aika tarkkaa, että mitä tässä kuvassa oikein on.
Nämä on aika samanlaisia nämä kaikki.
Mutta tässä kuvassa on joku täällä viereisessä huoneessa salakuuntelee.
Se on palvelija, joka joko kehrää lankaa kankaaseen, joka evankeliumin mukaan lahjoitetaan sitten kirkolle, tai sitten vaan ihan kuuntelee salaa, mitä toisessa huoneessa tapahtuu.
Tässä kuvassa on joku toinenkin tyyppi. Tässä on lintu, joka näyttää ihan pääskyseltä.
Se on lahjoittaja. No, molemmat lahjoittajia. Toinen on maalattu omaksi hahmokseen ja toinen on saanut pääskysen hahmon. Lahjoittaja siis rahoitti maalauksen, joka sitten annettiin esimerkiksi kirkkoon.
Mistä johtuu toi sanonta, että tyhmä kuin aasi? Kun eihän ne varmaan oikeasti tyhmiä eläimiä ole.
Ei ole tyhmiä. Mä luulen, että johtuu, että niillä on niin erilainen käytösmalli kuin hevosilla, että niitä ei ole aina ihan ymmärretty. Että ne on aika väärin ymmärrettyjä eläimiä.
Miten, kun naasit on täällä Suomessa näihin kylmiin oloihin, niin miten, kun mä oon mieltänyt, että ne on lämpimissä maissa aina, että ihmetyttää, että miten ne on tänne ajautunut ja mistä niin Aasi on kotoisin?
Ihan alkuja Aasi on lähtöisin Afrikasta, eli sieltä, mistä kaikki kavioeläimet on lähtöisin. Ja Aasi on sitten, sitä tavataan tämmöisillä kuivilla, aika kovillakin alueilla, missä yöt on tosi kylmiä ja päivät kuumia. Eli ne on erittäin sopeutuvaisia eri lämpötiloihin sitten. Ja sitten tietenkin, kun se on kotieläimenä ollut lähemmäs 4000 vuotta, niin sitä on myös jalostettu ja ihmiset on tuonut sitä mukanaan pohjoisempaa ja siten se on sitten sopeutunut myös kylmempiin ilmastoihin.
Moi. Moi. Kokeillaan näitä siipiä nyt. No niin, sovitetaan näitä. Ops. Niin. Laita kädet ihan tonne niinku reppuapuksi sit selkeä. Saako sen toisen? Se on siellä alempana. Nyt.
Joo.
Onko?
Joo.
Hyvä. Nonni. Sulat näköjään irtoaa koko ajan, että niitä pitää liimata.
Joo.
Tänne lisää. Pyöritkö ihan hitaasti ympäri niiden kanssa, niin mä näen.
Joo. Näin.
Joo.
Sori, Pulu. Sori. Pulu.
Eli nyt me aloitettais ja tehdään ne kun Maria kohtaa enkelin, niin sä voisit istua tohon.
Joo.
Niin mä kerron tästä, että näissä, miten Maria vastaanottaa ton enkelin, niin se on 3 suhtautumistapaa, joista yksi on semmoinen, missä se niin kuin tervehtii ystävällisesti. Toinen on semmoinen, missä se niin kuin pelästyy ja vähän niin kuin torjuu sitä enkeliä. Ja sitten on 3, jossa se on niin kuin ottaa sen vastaan nöyrästi sen tiedon. Niin voitaisiin niin kuin harjoitella nämä kaikki 3 peräkkäin. Ja se eka voitaisiin aloittaa siitä ystävällisestä. No niin. Maria istuu tuolilla ja nostaa vasemman kätensä tervehdykseen ja katsoo ystävällisesti enkeliä silmiin jotenkin. Jotenkin näin. Okay. Mutta se tietysti miten sä teet sen, mutta onko tää nyt selkeetä? Voidaanko kokeilla?
Joo.
No niin. Ole hyvä. Just noin. Hyvä. Kiitoksia. Nyt me voidaan tehdä se toinen reaktio, se tässä, missä Maria pelästyy enkeliä. Ja niissä maalauksissa Marialla on usein niin kuin kädettä rintakehän suojana, jotenkin kevyesti nyrkissä ja se kääntää vartaloa enkelistä poispäin. Mutta säilyttää katsekontakti, ettei se enkeli pääse niin kuin takapäin yllättämään. Ja just noin. Onko sulla mitään, mitä toi enkeli voisi tehdä, että sä pelästyisit?
No, se voisi jotenkin yrittää hyökätä mun päälle noiden siipien kanssa.
Voisi yrittää
Ok. Okay. Jees. Voidaanko kokeilla saman tien? Joo. Mennään alkuasemiin ja Noniin. Ole hyvä. Okei. Sitten tehdään vielä tämä 3. reagointitapa, joka on se nöyrä, jossa Maria nostaa kädet ristiin rinnalle ja kun enkeli lähestyy, painaa katseensa maahan. Sun pitäisi mennä polvilleen, pystyykö sä menemään?
Joo.
Joo, hyvä. Just noin. Ja sit enkeli. Sä meet kans polvilleen, lähestyt vähän Mariaa ja vastaat ihan samalla eleellä Marialle kuin mikä Marialla on. Voidaanko kokeilla?
Joo.
Joo.
Okei. Olkaa hyvä.
Eikä helpompi, jos itse otat käteen noin se toisesta puolesta ja vähän niin kuin sortsit sieltä.
Täältä.
Joo, sieltä lenksusta läpi.
No, mä voin auttaa.
Ja toinen
Ja
kanssa.
sä voit tukea muuhunkin, jos Joo. Joo.
Ja sinne. Nostatko vähän helmoja?
Voinko mä pitää täältä?
Joo, nostetaan ihan.
Jos mä pidän tästä. Miltä tuntuu? Ihan hyvä. Joo. Yes.
Nyt alkaa olla tukevan tuntusta.
Hyvä. Joo. Sitten kun sun paino menee niiden päälle, niin
Joo.
sit sä tunnet sen oikein kunnolla.
Lasketaan mekon helmat alas. Pistetään vaiherit kiinni. Ja mä nostan sut ihan tonne ylös.
Oho.
Joo, se
Joo.
valmis.
Joo. Pidä kiinni näistä edelleen.
Ei tarvi.
Ei tarvii?
Ei tarvi. Nosta jalkoja ylös ja paina. Noin, ja kantapäitä ylös.
Kantapäät ylös.
Joo.
Ja vielä pitäisi päästä niin kuin enemmän.
Joo.
Miten mä pääsen?
Painamalla vaan eteenpäin.
Siis yläkroppaa eteenpäin.
Ja vaikka käsiä pitkälle eteen, niin pitkälle kuin päästä. No niin.
Nyt mä kiepun. No eikä se haittaa, kunhan mä nyt yritän saada itselle siihen vaakatasoon.
Joo.
Ai.
Noin. Laske jalat irti sieltä vaijereista.
Meinaat, että mä uskalla?
Kyllä. Laske, et sä niillä jaloilla siellä pysy kuitenkaan. Noin. Ja sitten vähän...
Mihin suuntaan mä keikahdan nyt, kun mä päästän irti?
Varpaat kohti lattiaa nyt.
Varpat kohti lattiaa?
Joo.
Pysyks mä kiinni ihan oikeesti?
Pysyt varmasti.
Nyt pelottaa.
No niin. Enkeleille joskus käy noin. No niin. Se oli voltti.
No ja katse ylöspäin. Hyvä. Okei. Läheisellä räystään reunalla joukko mustarastaita keikuttelee itseään. Ne lennähtävät välillä viereiseen marjapensaaseen ja sieltä takaisin. Niillä on kokonaan musta kiiltävä höyhenpuku, josta keltainen nokka erottuu selvästi. Tai siten ihminen näkee mustarastaan. Linnun oma havainto on toisenlainen. Useimmat linnut kykenevät erottamaan tavallisten värien lisäksi spektrin ultravioletit sävyt, joille me olemme sokeita. Pensaiden mustat marjat hohtavat niille tummanvihreiden lehtien seassa kuin jalokivet. Ohikaartavan toverin siipiin osuvat auringonsäteet saavat sen höyhenet levittäytymään sävyissä, jotka ovat meille täysin tuntemattomia. Joskus eteemme saattaa tulla kuvitelma, kuva tai kohta kirjoitusta, jonka avulla voimme hetkeksi astua sisään noihin toisenlaisten olentojen ajan ja tilan erityisiin maailmoihin.
Hyvää päivää, Maria. Terveisiä Jumalalta. Älä pelkää, Maria. Tuon sinulle viesti Jumalalta. Sinä tulet raskaaksi ja synnytät pojan, jonka nimeksi tulee Jeesus. Hänestä tulee hyvä mies. Jumala antaa hänelle paljon valtaa tässä maailmassa, eikä hänen voimallaan ole loppua.
Miten se on mahdollista? Minähän olen koskematon. En ole ollut kenenkään miehen kanssa.
Pyhä henki laskeutuu päällesi ja peittää sinut varjollaan. Ja lapsi, joka syntyy, on myös pyhä, ja häntä kutsutaan Jumalan pojaksi. Myös serkkusi Elisabet, joka on jo vanha, eikä ole koskaan kyennyt tulemaan raskaaksi, odottaa lasta. Myös hänelle Jumala teki ihmeen.
Minä olen uskolle avoin ihminen, Herran palvelija. Tapahtukoon minulle se, mitä sanot.
If I had no place to fall and I needed to, could I count on you to lay me down? I'll never tell you no lies. I don't believe it's wise. You got pretty eyes. Won't you spin me around? I'm not much of a lover, it's true. I'm here and I'm gone and I'm forever blue. But I'm sure wanting you.
I have to say, it's so slow. I so much wished I could have shown you the installation because it's with 3 images and it's the rhythm quite different than in this one. And when one shows a film, it would be really worth showing. It's kind of in a real cinema with the real sounds. And now you could hear the dialogue, not much more. But anyway. So we have the questions and answers. Do you have anything you want to comment or ask? Or? Okay.
Hi, Lisa. Welcome. I was first introduced to your work through, I think it was the Louisiana with If 6 Was 9. So my question was going to be about this movement from installation to screening to single, because it seems to have happened. It's something you keep doing in your work, going back even then, Ana Aki God, you know. So I just would like to hear you talk a little more about that, that you came out and said that was interesting immediately, that you wish we would have seen the installation.
Yeah. Yeah, because usually when I make a work, not all of them, but of many of them, I make an installation version with several screens and then a film version, and sometimes the film is also kind of a split screen divided on several in several images, and I actually did something like that also with this one, but it just didn't work. Somehow needed the close-ups and to get the atmosphere and the emotions, but I'm still working kind of with both, and sometimes it is kind of important to go for the more kind of traditional things and explore things there, and even if I feel that the installation format with the multiple images is much more interesting to work with and show to people. But then again, it also depends on the topic and the subject matter, that how the work should be like.
Hi. You mentioned that you work mostly with non-actors, except for maybe 2 actors, one of whom was I think her name is pronounced Kati Uutinen, who I know from the films of Aki Kaurismäki.
Yes.
How did you come to work with her? Why did you choose her for this piece? And did she have a very special role in the conception of the piece?
I have to ask Sara, because I can't remember. Mikä oli eka leffa, missä Kati oli? Oliko se tämä? Niin. I can't remember which one. The film was Where is Where, which I made 2008, which is about the kind of based on a true story of 2 boys, Algerian boys, who during the Algerian independence war killed their best friend, a French boy, and there she was. I worked with her for the first time, and I just think that she's an excellent actor, and wanted to work with her. And also, I think that she's really good in this role here, because she really managed to kind of give the space for the other women, and kind of how would I say, kind of very well leveled. Is that the word? Kind of with others. Yeah. Okay.
Hi, I have a question about the process. Maybe I just didn't understand what you said before. So could you explain a little bit about your relationship with the women, and how was the process of rehearsing, and why did you choose to kind of reenact maybe the rehearsing?
Sorry, why did
you choose to reenact and to film the reenactment of the rehearsal, if that's true? Because I think that's not clear for me.
Yeah.
And what did you feel that they gained at the end after making the film with you?
Who gained? The women. Oh, that's a really huge question. I can't really, because time to time I think that I really would have loved to have the shooting documented, because so many things happened there, but I've promised the women that I will not tell, and more and more I think about that. Would be nice to re-ask them if I could tell their backgrounds and what really happened, and why Mary is Mary, and how she felt about her role, and what could I say? It's kind of, I think it was important, really important, for example, the angel Gabriel, to see herself there, flying and doing everything, and see herself on the screen. It really helped her, as well as also Mary. And hey, we had also fun, a lot of fun there. I was not waiting to make any miracles, but I think I also learned a lot during this process. Did I answer your question? Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Oh, okay, about the rehearsing. So what happened was that, where would I start? I think it's, from the beginning, it was not important for me to kind of try to achieve some kind of a perfect acting or something like this, but more like explore how the women would be able to be on the screen and what they could show and what they could kind of tell us and what would their relationship be with the animal actors and how would this group of humans and non-humans kind of form a whole or a group of living beings, and how would it be visible on the screen. So it's kind of difficult to judge then certain things. So no, I lost it. What was the question? Oh, sorry. Because I saw the documentation because I wanted to do the remake to see whether it's worth making or what does it mean nowadays. So what does the Annunciation paintings mean? I mean, I could have talked also about the perspective more and how the perspective was kind of how entered the paintings during the Renaissance, during the boom of Annunciation paintings, and how there was something about this in the dialogue, how the knowledge is kind of linked with the way of perception and with our ideas of the perspective and how we see things. And but I felt that I had to somehow find a certain season, certain things to kind of open the situation so that I could maybe achieve some kind of an atmosphere or togetherness or something about the acting, and I also I'm really sorry that I was so serious when I was talking here because I was so nervous, and then I kind of spoiled the experience of watching because I think it's a kind of doesn't need any serious approach, this film, but that it's supposed to be funny and depending on where it's shown and on the audience, sometimes there's a lot of laughing, and when I'm not kind of preventing this reaction beforehand. Oh,
you can sit here, Dan. Mine was just a comment. You take the question.
Maybe two.
Okay. Very quick question. You talk about these different forms that come out of the work, so they take shape. Are they a single work with different parts, or are they different works?
Does it matter?
I'm thinking of it more from your perspective,
yeah,
less from mine.
I think it's different works, but then again, depending on the context and situation and where you see, for example, the exactly same film, that can also feel a very different work. But I think they reach different audiences, and when I have a chance to do that, I really like to make a film for a film festival and then show the installation in art context.
I was just going to say, on the idea of the way you lay the film out and the reenactment and then the final performance, I think what's really wonderful is I wasn't expecting it to cohese, but the actual final enunciation is like really moving.
Oh, thank you.
That's really nice.
Mm-hmm.
So.
For me, the final scene is the scene where there's Mary and donkey walking. Yeah. Okay.
There's so many things to say about this piece. It's very peculiar and kind of creates a sort of quiet awe, but it is funny starting with Santa Claus. So I'm not sure we were the best audience in that regard, but I was wondering if, given how important it was for you to frame this piece with the text and with this idea that humans are sort of single-minded and incapable, perhaps, of seeing the different possibilities in space and time and so on, and how the other creatures are kind of carriers of that. It seems like in some of your other work there is a sense of a magic or a sense of the inexplicable or the uncanny, other realms, and there's always a bit of humor with it too. But I was wondering if you were also looking at faith or belief. You used the word belief, right, which is kind of really important in terms of this particular story, and if that is a kind of way that humans have, a path humans have created to, account for the unaccountable. Sorry, that was way too long, but
okay.
The work is
First of all, about the humans, what I felt after making the film, I think this is where they could say also that the animals and the kind of divine elements, they kind of redefine what is human. So I don't think at all that, maybe it's there, but I don't see it that way, that the humans are somewhat less valuable than, or less whatever, than the animals. I just try to kind of somehow bring them together, to find the togetherness and being next to someone. And but then on the other hand, I sincerely really think that humans are quite big idiots, like in many things. So like what's happening in the Arctic and the car business in Germany, and there would be like huge amounts of examples of this. So people have no excuse. So thank you. Thank you.